Hi there, this is John Fairhurst with my review of Allen Steele's Chronospace. The book itself is copyrighted Allen Steele 2001, and the review edition was published by Ace Books in 2002, and the cover used to introduce this review was made by Danilo Duchak. In terms of genre, this novel involves time travel and alternate history. The story opens with a quick look at a reconnaissance mission made to the Anasazi Native Americans that gives us an introduction to a growing mystery from our time-travelling descendants when what looks like an angel appears to the crew of the Chronos ship. We're then brought forward to what was the present for Steele while he was writing this novel, or 1998, where we're introduced to David Murphy as he makes his way into work as excuse me, at NASA's Washington headquarters. Things start taking a strange tack when he's called into a meeting with his bosses, and they're all over him for his latest article for Analog Science Fiction. Personally, I think they were just jealous. Apparently, the article looks at the possibility of UFOs being time machines rather than spaceships. This just annoys Dr. Murphy, and when he gets a phone call from Greg Benford inviting him out for a lunch meeting to talk over the article, he's all excited, although a bit suspicious, for Professor Benford said he'd been at a conference that Murphy hadn't heard of, but a visit with Benford was too good to pass upon. The Greg Benford he meets looks good, and they have a very informed talk about Murphy's hypothesis. But something just didn't ring true, and when Murphy brings up Benford's own experience with writing about time travel, the award-winning Timescape, the 1981 Nebula and 1980 British Science Fiction Awards, since you ask, the acclaimed author and scientist doesn't seem to have any idea that he's even written the book. Murphy makes an excuse and finds a phone booth where he can phone a lab in California, where he knows Professor Benford works. And yes, he does get to speak to the man. So who's the fake? By the time Murphy gets back to their table, though, the fake has done a runner, and a desperate search for him doesn't show up anything. In between Murphy's sections of the book, we learn more about our time-travelling friends as they plan a trip to infiltrate the last voyage of the Hindenburg, where we're introduced to the mission setup process, especially how they managed to fit in during the mission. They know the history, how it blew up 37 seconds after coming into land and killing 35 crew and passengers. They managed to coat the passenger and crew areas on audio-visual bugs, but does the Hindenburg go up in flames? Of course not. We're only about a third of the way through the book at this point. Our time travellers realise things have gone badly wrong when the agents marginally escape from the burning wreck of the Hindenburg. It becomes a restrained wander over to their escape vehicle, and they set a panicked course for home. But our curiosity isn't immediately satisfied as we cut back to Dr. Murphy. But this Dr. Murphy, it quickly becomes apparent, isn't the David Murphy we'd left running for his car. Incidentally, Steele has put date stamps on his chapter headings, and the last Murphy section was Monday, January the 14th, 1998. And this section is headed Friday the 16th of January, 1998. So the day should be a Wednesday, or the date for the Monday should have been the 12th, which is the correct calendar date. When we first met this Dr. Murphy, he seems to be a bit of a loser, suffering the mother of all hangovers and a rocky marriage. He also doesn't work for NASA either. Just after the boss of the OPS calls to tell him that there's been a crash out in Tennessee, he's sufficiently hungover that it takes him quite a while to fully comprehend the import of this call. We then get another cut back to our time travellers, still stuck in 1937, trying to work out what had gone wrong with the timing of the explosion of the Hindenburg. It finally exploded 35 minutes after they expected it to do. So, and just how bad a screw up this was, Frank, one of the insertion team, reckoned it's pretty major mess up. Granted, the Hindenburg did explode, but none of the people aboard dies, leaving them alive to change the future in all sorts of unknowable ways. His companions didn't think this was such a big deal. They still existed, and their hopper was still safely up in orbit. When recovered by their pilot, he was even more panicked than Frank. barely waiting to get the timeship out of Earth's atmosphere before opening a tunnel home, but something goes wrong, flinging them out who knows where. With an immediate cut back to Dr. Zach's timeline, we begin to get an idea of what's caused Dr. Zach's sudden trip to Tennessee. We also get to learn that this Dr. Murphy is now working for the Office of Paranormal Sciences, and we've already learnt that this US has lost a lot of its technological savvy when the plane that Murphy and his colleagues are on is described as a 15-year-old plane, the last US model available to be purchased by the US government. On the flight, we learn that a couple of F-15s had had a close encounter with a UFO, following it down to where it crashed into a lake. At the crash site, although hidden behind a force screen, the downed craft has been surrounded by the army, and when Murphy and his colleagues turn up, it looks like it's a classic standoff. The investigative party includes a psychic who's trying to gain impressions of the crew with about as much success as you might imagine. Those aboard the crashed timeship had been able to repair the damage caused by the failed time jump and the attack by one of the F-15s, but they couldn't make an attempt to go home before finding out just when they were. So one of them volunteers to make his way out of the ship and find out. Things were going reasonably well until the time traveller meets up with an annoyed Dr. Murphy, and the pair had an altercation that left Murphy nearly unconscious. Making it back to their home time, the travellers find that a major time distortion had occurred when they almost ran into a quickly decaying planetary ring where the moon had once been. Earth wasn't in much better state, a battered, dead world, or at least as far as humanity was concerned. Back in Dr. Zach's present, he finds evidence that time travel is real and a rough idea how the trick is done. So somehow he becomes the lead scientist in getting this project off the ground. This takes years to work through, though, and thankfully we aren't treated to any of the intermediate experimentations. Instead, we are sent forward to this time track 2314 and the one spot on the planet that hadn't been devastated by the destroyed moon, where Frank is reintroduced to Dr. Zach, kidnapped from his time 25 years previously in his own personal timeline. This introduces the time travellers to the solution of the mystery of the so-called angels, though Dr. Murphy has far less flattering comments about these creatures. After it becomes clear that the time ships were the reason the angel had initiated the destruction of humanity, the crew of the time travellers reckon it's worth seeing if they could run a counter-adjustment mission on the Hindenburg destruction, or without revealing themselves to them that were on the original mission. Only they find they weren't actually on this Hindenburg, and there'd been another anomaly, and we're now on our third timeline. Though we actually find we've looped back to Dr. David Murphy, who was sore about his treatment at NASA and was about to become a well-known science fiction writer, and his son would become a scientist laying the groundwork for time travel. Frank goes to talk to him as Gregory Benford, but of course we already know how well this works. Up to this point, the story managed to maintain a degree of continuity, but as the characters from the three timelines all converge together, this begins to slip a little, though to be fair, it's not really that bad. The best bit in this section is the interaction between the two Murphys as they drive towards a startling rendezvous. Overall, this was a fun read, though it did take some thought to keep the continuity correct as the various timelines overlap and swap around. The conclusion was good. I mean, it followed logically on from the nature of the problem that they were facing, but if you were expecting a super technical ending, you don't actually get it, maybe. And that's it. Now here's where I'd normally ask you to visit the Amazon affiliate links down below in the description, but it looks like this book is actually out of print. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with friends. And if you do know of any Amazon links, Amazon.co and Amazon.com links, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out other reviews. Goodbye.